Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of Qualiverse. Today, we're going to be talking about creating an audio test plan for your spaces, otherwise known as Can You Hear Me Now? Do you guys remember that Verizon guy? He'd walk all around the US on his cell phone asking, Can you hear me now? Good. Take another few steps. Can you hear me now? Good. His character's name was literally Testman. So this guy, Paul Macchiarelli, was a phenom with that one character and that one line. He's now worth over $10 million and has not only worked for Verizon, but also for Old Navy, Merrill Lynch, Dasani, T-Mobile, and Heineken in a similar capacity. Clearly, he was onto something. The idea that a company would pay someone to walk around the nation and stop every few feet to make sure the performance was good struck a nerve with the public. That's a company that cares about their users' experiences, right? Well, at least their marketing department painted a great picture, at the very least. As AV professionals, we can take a page out of Verizon's marketing department's playbook. We should keep in mind that the audio experience for our users will change depending on where they are in a space. An often overlooked checklist item from the AV9000 commissioning checklist is that make sure there is a test plan locating a representative sampling of all listener positions with at least a center and corner location included. Now, someone might read this and think, what's going on here? I thought this entire checklist was the test plan. Now you're asking me to come up with another test plan within the test plan? What kind of inception level doohickey business is this? And forgive me, I try to keep the language clean on this platform, but sometimes some blue language just sneaks out. But the idea behind creating the audio test plan is to recognize that not every listening position in a space is created equal. We want to keep that in mind for all the listening experience tests we do for commissioning. So when we need some type of plan to take a sampling of the listening positions in the room to assure that all listeners in a space receive an excellent experience. They will undoubtedly be slightly different, but regardless of that variance, they should still have an excellent listening experience. And the different spaces, the different locations in a system, it's easy to visualize the different positions in a large auditorium space, for example. There's floor seating with the line of sight to the central cluster. You're right in that near field. But there's also the balcony, right? And they certainly get some contribution from the main loudspeaker cluster, but they might also need some reinforcement from some fill loudspeakers here and there to get comparable levels. Then there's also the mezzanine area that might need most of the audio to come from ceiling loudspeakers installed underneath the balcony because they're out of that line of sight. There might even be a lobby outside the theater that has to contend with street noise. So each section, floor, balcony, mezzanine, lobby, each section will have a wildly different audio solution that needs to be verified to assure an excellent listening experience for the users. Having an audio test plan for such a complicated space just makes sense. But what about for like a medium-sized conference room? You would be surprised at how many different acoustic areas could be found in a relatively small room. Maybe there's an unbalanced HVAC vent in the corner of the room causing a lot of ambient noise in that corner. Maybe there's a window on one side of the room that is letting in large amounts of street noise. Perhaps there's a curved glass wall in the room that logarithmically focuses the sound onto one or two seats at the table. It throws the entire system off. What if the room only had loudspeakers by the display so that the front of the room hears clearly, crystal clear, but the participants in the back of the room, further away from the display, are straining to hear the far end of their conferences? These seemingly simple rooms can have many subspaces within them, driving the need to take a sample of readings to confirm anyone in the room has that great experience. Once we have the test plan sorted, there are several audio tests we should consider to verify the system is performing well for all users. These all have something to do with taking audio level measurements. First, we should take ambient noise measurements at each of our test plan locations. Ambient noise is the noise that will always be present in the room that is not intended. It's not amplified. It's not meant to be distributed. It's the background HVAC noise. It's the street noise, building sounds, people talking, etc. It's the noise we have to overcome with the audio system, distributing the audio we actually want to listen to, not the noise. We want that signal level. It's important to take ambient noise measurements at each test point so that we get the room sampling to assure our sound system is loud enough for all listeners. And there's a great question in the CQD class from AQAV that always trips up a lot of students. There's a list of ambient noise readings. So there's 38 dB, 39 dB, 43 dB, 37 dB, etc. What the point is, there's a series of ambient noise measurements taken in the room, ranging from 37 dB SPL weighted to 43 dB SPL weighted. The question is, what is the ambient noise of the room? And many people immediately want to take the average. But if we're designing a system to assure that everyone has a great experience, we don't want to design with the average. That means half the users, by definition, half the users will have a subpar experience. So we want to design for the worst case area so that all users have a great experience. So the ambient noise for the space, the one number we should use for our designs, should be the worst case or the highest number, that 43 dB SPL weighted. And this is very similar to selecting a display size, right? We don't use the average distance of viewers in the room to determine the display size. We use the furthest viewer to assure that everyone in the room has a great viewing experience. It's very similar with audio, different measurements, right? Different criteria, but we're still designing for the worst case. Now, so that's ambient noise. We did that. We have that covered. We have ambient noise measurements at each one of our test locations. The next level we need to measure is going to be the listen level at each test point. The requirement here is that the system is producing audio loud enough for all users. It needs to be loud enough so that it's easy to consume. To that point, each listen level measured should be at least 14 dB and ideally 24 dB whenever we can. 14 dB louder than the ambient noise measured at that position. We want to assure that the signal level is adequately louder than the noise level in the room so that users don't have to strain to hear and comprehend what is being distributed. And we all know, especially in the AV industry, you know what I'm saying? We all know how difficult it is to have a conversation in a loud bar. The signal level, which is my conversation, is not adequately louder than the noise level, which is everyone else's conversation. So it's difficult to hear and focus on what is being said. We don't want this for our installed systems. We want it to be easy to listen to, right? We want users to be able to clearly hear what is being said and have the intended audio signal level from the system be much louder, at least 14 dB louder than any ambient noise in the room. The other thing we want to keep in mind is we also want to make sure that listen levels around the entire room are comparable so that everyone has a similar experience. Everyone has a similar level no matter where they are. We do not want people seated close to the displays to be blasted out of their chairs from the sound pressure in the system, while at the same time users in the back of the room are straining to hear. What'd you say? The tolerance of the audio coverage will vary by users and maybe the intended system use, right? It might be plus or minus 3 dB, so a swing of 6 dB for the entire space for general conference spaces, or it could be plus or minus 1 dB in executive space where each seat has a very similar experience. We want every user to have that similar audio experience in the space. And to do that, we need an audio test plan to verify this. It's not enough to pick one spot in a room to take audio measurements. Even simple rooms have counterintuitive acoustical nooks and crannies that require a sampling of locations throughout the space to assure all users have an excellent experience. That's what we're going for, to make sure everyone in that room, everyone who is using our system, has an excellent experience. And that's not to say that the number of test plan locations has to be exhaustive or cost prohibitive or take hours to measure, but they need to provide an adequate sampling of the space so we make sure everyone is covered. And the nice thing about these measurements is they can be documented very quickly with an inexpensive sound pressure level meter, ideally one that's calibrated to an NAST traceable standard. And that sound pressure meter and the test plan will assure that all users in the space has an easy time comprehending what is distributed by the audio system. Testman, the guy from Verizon, had to walk around the country for thousands of miles every few steps to make sure we could hear him now. And that is an incredible amount of work. But as the commercial said, it's what makes us the most reliable network in the nation. That's what they claimed. As AV professionals, we don't need to walk thousands of miles to make sure all our listeners are happy. But we do need to have that audio test plan. So that is the talk for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please hit me up. Thank you for joining me and have an AV day.